Sixpence by Catherine Mansfield. Children are unaccountable little creatures. Why should a small boy like Dicky, good as gold as a rule, sensitive, affectionate, obedient, and marvelously sensible for his age, have moods when, without the slightest warning, he suddenly went mad dog, as his sisters called it, and there was no reason doing anything with him. Dicky, come here, sir, at once. Do you hear your mother calling you Dicky? But Dicky won't come. Oh, he heard, right enough. A clear, ringing little laugh was his only reply. And away he flew, hiding, running through the uncut hay on the lawn, dashing past the woodshed, making a rush for the kitchen garden, and there dodging, peering at his mother from behind the mossy apple trunks, and leaping up and down like a wild Indian. It had begun at tea time, while Dicky's mother and Mr. Spears, who was spending the afternoon with her, were quietly sitting over there sewing in the drawing room. This, according to the servant girl, was what happened at the children's tea. They were eating their first bread and butter as nicely and quietly as you please, and the servant girl had just poured out the milk and water, when Dicky had suddenly seized the bread plate, put it upside down on his head, and clutched the bread knife. Look at me, he shouted. His startled sister looked, and before the servant girl could get there, the bread plate wobbed, slid, flew to the floor, and broke into shivers. At this awful point, the little girls lifted up their voice and shrieked their loudest. Mother, come and look what he has done. Dickie's broke a great big plate. Come and stop him, mother. You can imagine how mother came flying, but she was too late. Dickie had leaped out of his chair, run through the French windows onto the veranda, and well, there she stood, popping her thumb on and off, helpless. What could she do? She couldn't chase after the child. She couldn't stalk Dickie among the apples and damsons. That would be too undignified. It was more than annoying. It was exasperating, especially as Mrs. Spears of all people, whose two boys were so exemplary, was waiting for her in the drawing room. Very well, Dicky, she cried. I shall have to think of some way of punishing you. I don't care, sounded the high little voice, and again there came that ringing laugh. The child was quite beside himself. Oh, Mrs. Spears, I don't know how to apologize for leaving you by yourself like this. It's quite all right, Mr. Bandel, said Mrs. Spears in her soft, sugary voice, and raising her eyebrows in the way she had. She seemed to smile to herself as she stroked the gathers. These little things will happen from time to time. I only hope it was nothing serious. It was Dicky, said Mr. Bandel, looking rather helplessly for her only fine needle, and she explained the whole affair to Miss Pierce. And the worst of it is, I don't know how to cure him. Nothing when he is in that mood seems to have the slightest effect on him. Mr. Spears opened her pale eyes. Not even a whipping, said she. But Miss Bandel, threading her needle, pursed up her lips. We never have whipped the children, she said. The girls never seem to have needed it. And Dicky is such a baby, and the only boy somehow. Oh, my dear, said Miss Pierce, and she laid her sewing down. I don't wonder Dicky has these little outbreaks. You don't mind my saying so, but I am sure you make a great mistake in trying to bring up children without whipping them. Nothing really takes its place, and I speak from experience, my dear. I used to try gentle measures. Mrs. Pierce drew in her breath with a little hissing sound, soaping the boys' tongues. For instance, with yellow soap, or making them stand on the table for the whole of Sunday afternoon. But no, believe me, said Mrs. Pierce, there is nothing like handing them over to their father. Miss Bandel, in her heart of hearts, was dreadfully shocked to hear of that yellow soap. But Miss Pierce seemed to take it so much for granted that she did too. Dear father, she said, then you don't whip them yourselves. Never. Mrs. Pierce seemed quite shocked at the idea. I don't think it is a mother's place to whip the children. It's the duty of the father, and besides, he impresses them so much more. Yes, I can imagine that, said Mrs. Bandel faintly. Now, my two boys, Miss Pierce smiled kindly, encouragingly at Miss Bandel, who would behave just like Dicky if they were not afraid to. As it is, oh, your boys are perfect little models, cried Mr. Bandel. They were quieter, better behaved little boys. In the presence of grown-ups could not be found. In fact, Miss Pierce calls often made the remark that you never would have known that there was children in the house. There wasn't very often. In the front hall, under a large picture of fat, cheery old monks fishing by the riverside, there was a thick, dark horse whip that had belonged to Miss Pierce's father, and for some reason the boys preferred to play out of sight of this, behind the dog kennel or in the tool house or round about the dustbin. It's such a mistake, sighed Miss Pierce, breathing softly as she folded her work. To be weak with children when they are little, it's such a sad mistake, and one so easy to make. It is so unfair to the child. That is what one has to remember. Now Dicky's little escape his this afternoon seemed to me as though he had done it on purpose. It was a child's way of showing you that he needed a whipping. Do you really think so? Miss Bandley was a weak little thing, and this impressed her very much. I do. I feel sure of it, and a sharp reminder now and then, cried Miss Pierce in a quite a professional manner. Administered by the father will save you so much trouble in the future. Believe me, my dear. She put her dry, cold hand over Miss Bandel. I shall speak to Edward the moment he comes in, said Dicky's mother firmly. The children had gone to bed before the garden gate banged, and Dicky's father staggered up the steep concrete steps carrying his bicycle. It had been a bad day at the office. He was hot, dusty, tired out. But by this time, Miss Bandel had become quite excited over the new plan, and she opened the door to him herself. Oh, Edward, I am so thankful you have come home, she cried. Why, what happened? Edward lowered the bicycle and took off his hat. A red, angry pucker showered where the brim had pressed. What's up? Come into the drawing room, said Miss Bandel, speaking very fast. I simply can't tell you how naughty Dicky has been. You have no idea. You can't have at the office all day. How a child of that age can behave. He's been simply dreadful. I have no control over him. None. I have tried everything, Edward, but it is all no use. The only thing to do, she finished breathlessly, is to whip him. Is for you to whip him, Edward. In the corner of the drawing room there was a whatnot, and on the top shelf stood a brown china beer with painted tongue. It seemed in the shadow to be grinning at Dicky's father, to be saying, "Hooray, this is what you have come home to." "But why on earth should I start whipping him?" said Edward, staring at the bear. "We have never done it before." "Because," said his wife, "don't you see? It's the only thing to do. I can't control the child." Her words flew from her lips. They beat round his tired head. "We can't possibly afford a nurse. The servant girl has more than enough to do, and his naughtiness is beyond words." "You don't understand, Edward. You can't. You are at the office all day." The bear poked out his tongue. The scolding voice went on. Edward sank into a chair. "What I am to beat him with?" he said weakly. "Your slipper, of course," said his wife, and she knelt down to untie his dusty shoes. "Oh, Edward," she waited, "you have still got your cycling clips in the drawing room." "No, really." "Here's that enough." Edward nearly pushed her away. "Give me that slipper." He went up the stairs. He felt like a man in the dark night, and now he wanted to beat Dicky. Yes, damn it, he wanted to beat something. My God, what a life! The dust was still in his hot eyes. His arms felt heavy. He pushed upon the door of Dicky's slip of a room. Dicky was standing in the middle of the floor in the night shirt. At the sight of him, Edward's heart gave a warm throb of rage. "Well, Dicky, you know what I have come for." Dicky made no reply. "I have come to give you a whipping." No answer. "Lift up your nightshirt." At that Dicky looked up. He flushed a deep pink. "Must I?" he whispered. "Come on now. Be quick about it," said Edward, and grasping the slipper, he gave Dicky 3 hard slaps. "There's that will teach you to behave properly to your mother." Dicky stood there, hanging his head. "Look sharp and get into the bed," said his father. Still he didn't move, but a shaking voice said, "I haven't done my teeth yet, Daddy." "Eh, what's that?" Dicky looked up. Her lips were quivering, but his eyes were dry. He hadn't made a sound or shed a tear. Only he swallowed and said huskily, "I haven't done my teeth, Daddy." But at the sight of that little face, Edward turned, and not knowing what he was doing, he bolted from the room, down the stairs, and out into the garden. Good God, what had he done? He strode along and hid in the shadow of the pear tree by the hedge. Whipped Dicky, whipped his little man with a slipper, and what's the devil for? He didn't even know. Suddenly he barged into his room, and there was a little chap in the nightshirt. Dicky's father groaned and held on the hedge, and he didn't cry. Never a tear. If only he would cried or got angry, but that Daddy, and again he heard the quivering whisper, forgiving like that without a word. But he had never forgiven himself. Never. Coward, fool, brute. And suddenly he remembered the time when Dicky had fallen off his knee and sprained his wrist while they were playing together. He hadn't cried then either, and that was a little hero he had just whipped. Something's got to be done about this, thought Edward. He strode back to the house, up the stairs, into Dicky's room. The little boy was lying in the bed. In the half-light his dark head, with the square fringe, showed plant against a pale pillow. He was lying quite still, and even now he wasn't crying. Edward shut the door and leaned against it. What he wanted to do was to kneel down by the Dicky's head and cry himself and beg to be forgiven. But of course, one can't do that sort of thing. He felt awkward and his heart was wrong. "Not asleep yet, Dicky," he said lightly. "No, Daddy." Edward came over and sat on his boy's bed, and Dicky looked at him through his long lashes. "Nothing's the matter, little chap, is there?" said Edward, half whispered. "No, Daddy," come from Dicky. Edward put on his hat and carefully he took Dicky's hot little paw. You must not think any more of what happened just now, little man," he said huskily. "See, that's all over now. That's forgotten. That's never going to happen, see." Yes, Daddy. So the thing to do now is to buck up, little chap, said Edward, and to smile. And he tried himself an extraordinary, trembling apology for a smile, to forget all about it to a little man, old boy. Dickie lay as before. This was terrible. Dickie's father sprang up and went over to the window. It was nearly dark in the garden. The servant girl had run out, and she was twitching some white clothes off the bushes and pulling them over her arm. But in the boundless sky the evening star shone, and a big gum tree, black against the pale glow, moved its long leaves softly. All this he saw, while he felt in his trouser pocket for his money. Bringing it out, he chose a new sixpence and went back to the dicky. Here you are, little chap. Buy yourself something, said Ephraim, softly laying the sixpence on Dicky's pillow. But could even a whole sixpence blot out what had been?